Hello, everybody. Good evening and welcome from whenever, wherever you may be watching, listening. This is The Yard Sign, the most conservative, diverse, conservative political podcast in politics. And as I also like to say, what's the original? Man, I feel like it's been like a month and it was only like 2 weeks.
Okay, that works. I know it's been a while. It's been 7 days, guys.
The most diverse, conservative political podcast in politics, and
I thought it was the
most important, irrelevant podcast.
The most important, irrelevant podcast.
There we go. Okay, now I'm going to shut you back off. Johnny Torres with you. Thank you so much for joining me. As you see there, Aníbal David Cabrera joining me as always, and we'll introduce our special guest here in a moment. Let's run through today's topics. Aníbal monitoring the comments, so please keep those coming as always, and we'll integrate them into the show later on. Don't forget, if you miss any part of tonight's show, you can catch the video version on Facebook and YouTube, and you can also catch the audio version on pretty much any podcast platform out there in the Webiverse. But of course, don't forget to check the tech overlords at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and Samsung podcast platforms. All right.
Does that so well.
Oh, it's a compliment? Here, I'll turn it back on.
He does that poorly.
Oh. All right. So for tonight's, a little bit of a rehash for tonight's topics. We've got Biden crashing. Only this time it's not in a bicycle. It's his poll numbers that continue to do so. And so we'll pick that apart. Also, we're going to do the Biden rifle ban. And how far is this going to go? And unfortunately, as you might expect, some Republicans played right into it. And so we'll pick apart against who those individuals may have been. Our special guest brings a certain type of expertise on the environmental side. So for those of you here in Florida, and especially in Tampa Bay, who may remember Piney Point and the leak of chemicals and other things from that company and that facility, we're going to give an update on that and also just talk about Florida's environment and the politics behind it. And Elon Unfollows Twitter. Is the deal dead? Probably not, but we'll pick apart what's happening with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, as the deal for now, at least according to Elon, seems dead in the water. All right, let's go over to the table. On the far right, Aníbal David Cabrera. Hello, sir.
Hello. It's we apologize for unprofessionalism on this podcast. Okay, producer.
How are you?
I didn't see any additional comments. I'm doing good. It's been a good 7 days without having to worry about a podcast.
I know. We actually took the 4th of July off, amazingly.
We told no one.
Told no one. Of course. It's okay. And, it's sometimes it's better to just go quietly into the night. And
no, we are supposed to fight the dying of the light.
Yeah, well, we didn't take Memorial Day off, so
extra
we
points
figured
if you can tell me where that poem comes from.
Okay, in the comments, you'll get extra point in the comments if you say which poem that's from. And 4th of July, good for everybody. Yes.
I had a good time.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Did you have a good time?
Mine was
introduce you, by the way.
No, I know. So joining me here, and I meant to ask you before we got on, is the pronunciation of your last name, but it's Dr. Leo
Genco.
Oh, okay. So Dr. Leo Genco.
Yeah.
Reminds me of my jeans in middle school. And so Dr. Leo joins us as a friend of Aníbal's. You are an assistant professor at the University of Tampa.
Yes.
And a green criminologist, which, again, I wanted to wait until the show started to ask you what that meant, because I'm sure some of the Republican viewers of this program are probably ready to pounce.
What?
So what is a green criminologist?
A green criminologist is someone who just studies crimes against the environment.
And the Riddler.
And the Riddler, yes, yes. But that's basically the definition. There's a ton of
crimes against the environment.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a ton of branches of green criminology, like conservative criminology, that deals with illegal wildlife trade and hunting and all that. You have the ones that look at water pollution. You have ones that looks at land destruction. There's a whole bunch. Like, academia is about trying to make a name for yourself, so people love to make their own categories.
Sure, right.
So there's
The
a
niches,
plethora.
the riches are in the niches.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. But I specifically specialize in macro analyses of how the organization of our economy affects the distribution of our behavior in society.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And because you were saying the professor that you currently work under is what type of criminologist?
He's a Marxist criminologist.
Marxist
is what he started out
criminologist.
as. Yeah.
Right. So he basically just looks to throw Marxists in jail, right?
No. He takes the Marxist perspective.
That'd be too easy.
Yeah, he looks at the economy through a Marxist lens.
Right.
And he looks at how the economy mixed with politics play into how we define and enforce against the people. And so for him, he doesn't do micro studies. Like, he doesn't believe in micro studies. It's all macro. So he looks at the trends. Like, for instance, if you look at a capitalist country and like looking at how one capitalist country has a larger gap in classes versus one that doesn't, why is the crime different there? And is it because of the politics, the deals made? For instance, one of the books he recommended me to read while I was under him was The Fiscal Crisis by James O'Connor. And that, even though he's a socialist scholar, he's against unions because they make bad deals.
Oh, wow.
They are not good and healthy for the relationship between the economy and government.
Right.
And so that's how he has his perspective on crime, that a lot of it is dictated by how the economy and politics play out and what behaviors are not accepted in society.
So we were talking before the show, of course, about some of the kind of things happening here in the state environmentally. And so when it comes to, let's say, green criminology, would you say basically what we did during the Eisenhower administration, like to the Everglades? I mean, would that have been considered maybe by today's standards, a criminal act on the environment or on, let's say, the Everglades?
I do not like reflecting on the past. I don't.
Yeah.
That's
all right. That's fair.
Are you in politics?
Yeah, I am in politics.
That's all we do is bring up the past.
It's for me. It's we can look back in the past and apply our own standards today and be like, okay, yeah, that can be bad.
Right.
But what is that going to do? Like,
Sure, it doesn't accomplish anything.
It doesn't. And I tell my students in class all the time at the university I teach is, there's a point where you can use history to help you inform today's decisions, but using our own decisions today doesn't help to judge the past.
Well, that's the worst part of the cancel culture.
Yeah.
Is that they're using stuff from 10, 15, 20 years ago, to cancel people. And it's like, why?
Yeah, exactly.
It was like, it was a different universe. It was a different world back then.
There's different contexts. Like, there was some things that
social
people
norms
understood.
and
yeah. It's I can go on a whole tangent on.
Sorry, that's what we're all about.
This is the show to go on tangents. You are going to be in a world of pain.
In fact, we're gonna retitle the show On Tangent. That's just gonna be the new name of the show.
But yes. So it's very interesting to be a green criminologist because we're not necessarily trying to promote an idea that you need to be this sort of political figure or you need to be on this political spectrum. It's what's happening to the environment in our current state.
Yeah.
And that's where we leave it at. Now, there may be some few green criminologists that would push for a political agenda, but most of us are just looking at the current state and where the environment is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then obviously trying to make the laws in the state work towards preserving and protecting the environment?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very fascinating because there was a study by Melissa Jarrell and Joshua Ozemi about the EPA, and they find that the EPA doesn't really change its behavior much from presidencies.
Right.
It's very consistent. And so...
Like, I would say, like, maybe many federal agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because, again, they're so large now that it would be nearly impossible for them to kind of change course, every 4 years.
Oh, yeah. And so we just take that stance, like, look, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, this is going on.
Now, in your estimation, because I think this does touch on a lot of what's happening right now, especially when we're talking about gas prices, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so, which should have been one of our topics, in addition to the whole world is going nuts right now. What is it? Sri Lanka, Argentina.
yeah.
So Sri Lanka just lost its government. Argentina is plunging in
They're about
will not be able.
They're also about to toss out their prime minister.
Yeah, they cannot. The gas prices are going astronomical. I believe Thailand is starting to wobble. There's about 15 or 16 countries around the world that their governments are about to fall.
They're making January 6th look like like a practice run.
Tunisia's about to come apart again. There's
Well, they literally set fire to the prime minister's castle or whatever.
Also, they were in the swimming pool. I saw that video.
Yes, and they're having fun. They're having a pool party.
Look at this.
Nobody with antlers.
No Buffalo Man.
Not
No
yet.
Buffalo Man.
We'll find it eventually.
Oh,
Do they
man.
have buffaloes in Sri Lanka?
Well, they had but they had that guy. Remember in the
No, but that's because we have buffaloes.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
saying
Oh, yeah, no.
Do they have buffaloes?
I do
I
find
think
it.
those are native just to North America.
Yeah, I do find it interesting how the news coverage is completely different for our January 6th versus their insurrections.
Right.
I'm like, yes, it's an insurrection. Technically, that's an insurrection.
That's a real insurrection.
Yeah, and it's like
Like they're literally setting the building on fire.
yeah, it baffles me. I hate legacy media because they just skew everything.
Yeah.
They never compare apples to apples. They always want to do apples to oranges, and it pisses me off.
So let me bring it back to where I was headed, which was the gas prices being the big thing, and you probably follow this, or at least I'm assuming closer than most.
Yeah.
And you just talked about the EPA and whether or not it changes much from administration to administration. Were there enough changes from the Trump administration to the Biden administration to be a large cause for the increase in pricing? Because their claim is the Democrats will tell you, oh no, well, I mean, we've had more licenses than ever, and we've had more opportunities for them to drill than ever. Like they're trying to make it seem like it's open season on oil drilling. Well, but on the other hand, we know that their intent, because that's what they ran on, was to make it nearly impossible for oil companies to drill for oil. They killed off the pipeline projects. And so again, where does the EPA fall into that? And again, is that drastic enough? Even though I'm sure from everything the EPA does, it's probably it's probably a single digit percentage of what their responsibilities are.
Yeah, I'm trying to, because to me right now it reminds me of what happened early Obama years, and I can't remember what he did that affected the gas prices.
But wasn't it also a pipeline deal?
I want to believe so.
I think it was Keystone again that we're having that issue that drove prices up once again because of it. Also, it was some clean energy bill that he was trying to pass. I cannot remember. But yes, in his administration, they did cause something to increase gas prices.
Yeah, and so I compare it to that. That's what it reminds me of, is the horrible handling of the idea, like if you're going to shut down the Keystone pipeline, where are you going to compensate for that oil? And and that's usually what happens with Democrats and their policies. They cut something, but they're not like, okay, we're not going to compensate for this.
Well, they never think of the repercussions.
Yes.
And I say this, and I mean it genuinely. I mean, the Democrats in general, for the most part, with the exception of maybe abortion, they mean well, but they never think through their policies enough to truly understand and think through the repercussions of what they're trying to accomplish.
It's I listen to a lot of conservative podcasters, and they always mention it, and I believe it's true. They are so disconnected from the lives of normal people. Normal people can't live on electric vehicles.
Right.
We just can't. Look at rural America.
A, there's not enough of them.
Yes.
B, they're incredibly expensive.
The infrastructure to support that. And I realized, someone told me if a battery went bad in a Tesla, it is $22,000 to replace. Like, I don't have that money.
Oh, the rest of it's all just fiberglass and plastic. I mean, it really is. I mean, again, there's no engine. There's no,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, so if you lose, really where there was an engine, you're basically paying for a power plant, which is just the bottom of the vehicle.
Yes.
And so you're basically having to replace the entire bottom of the vehicle.
It's the, I forget, it was a while ago. It was actually when I started, when the Overton window started moving more left and I just started moving more right, where there was a reading, it was a news article in LA Times. I'm fuzzy, but they were talking about how it's economically and environmentally better to stick with your old car that you have until it's dead than buying a new car, because what that does is it ramps up production and demand, which you're creating more incentive to take resources out and to use more oil.
Yeah.
So
and a car that could still run.
Yes.
You know, maybe for another 5-10 years, it now ends up in a landfill somewhere.
Correct. And I think I'm a big country guy, so they are so innovative with their machines out there to make sure that they last long to get their money's worth. And it outstands me that in the urban cities, it's constantly, it's no longer working the way I want it. I'll just go get a new one.
Right.
It's like, no, put some work into it, save some money, save some stuff for the environment. And
as people do, especially now, you know, for example, this TV here right behind us, you know, people think that the minute that there's something wrong with it, well, I'll just get another one.
Yeah.
You know, when, again, like if you actually did your diligence and in the research, there's still TV repairmen out there and they'll fix it for $50.
Yep.
Or $100. But guess what? It's not $300 or $500 to replace it.
Correct.
I think a very common thing that people can apply this to is our computers, like laptops.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're like, well, it's not as fast. I'm like, just replace the battery. That solves a lot of problems.
No, yeah, right.
It does.
Yeah.
And so like with the gas situation that's going on, because I know we just went on a completely different tangent, but like it's the idea of like sustainability living versus spending.
Well, and again, as someone who represents themselves as an environmentalist, I mean, you know the actual environmental impact of creating these lithium batteries.
Oh, they're so bad, man.
You know, that all these cars are running on. And truth be told, again, like I want a Tesla. I mean, that's no secret. I mean, I have an RSVP for the truck. You know what I mean? Like it's on my wish list, right? I'm not trying to trick anybody into thinking I'm some environmentalist for wanting a Tesla. Like I know it's not great for the environment, you know, but again, it's about a balance, you know, because again, you know, like liberals are wanting to push wind and push solar and I'm not, and I'm all for it. But again, we got to understand that there's also a lot of cons to a lot of that renewable energy as well. The amount of land that it takes for wind turbine energy, and the damage it's doing to birds. The amount of land that has to be developed.
Yeah, but that's not even the crux of the scam. You cannot transition your economy into a green economy. We see what happened to Germany. Germany is dealing with that right now. When they tried to transfer, what was it? They were going to spend $250 billion to convert their entire system into green energy. And now what they're having to do is completely reverse that because they cannot, it doesn't function that way. And Germany's economy is about to collapse because of it, because they're going to start doing rolling blackouts because Russia just cut the nat gas supplies. And it's like, what kind of, for people that are so efficient, who would have thought this was going to happen? That they could not become energy independent.
Well, Leo, I mean, you know, fact or fiction here, because what I've heard is that modern nuclear technology would technically be the most environmentally friendly option that's out there right now.
In producing energy, yes. There is some skepticism.
The byproduct you're talking about.
Yeah, the byproducts and the construction of the facility is where most people are concerned. The more people who actually are going to think about this, not necessarily, it will help the environment or it's cost efficient. The people who really think about, okay, we're going to produce nuclear energy. How are we going to get there, and what's going to come out of it? I was reading an article in Pakistan, because they do this in Pakistan as well as what we do with nuclear waste. Do you know what they do with nuclear waste from the power plants?
I'm assuming they put it into a mountain.
Yeah, so they bury it 500 feet below ground.
Right.
But they found that this uranium can travel through land.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's not contained.
No.
They're just literally just dumping it into the...
Now the Pakistani efficiency when it comes to the proper disposing of the nuclear waste, I will be questioned to see how it is.
Well, yes,
because France has.
I thought, like in my mind, it's like it's in some container,
Well,
and then this
do you remember the
container.
name of the mountain here in the U.S.?
No.
I
But
can't remember either, but there is a facility here in the
Yeah.
United States that all the nuclear waste is actually sent there, and then they put it
Right.
they put it deep in the earth, and it's very environmentally friendly. So I haven't heard of a leak in there, but
how
I'm
about
not
friendly?
surprised at all that there's something happening in Pakistan.
there's I think, and I know a lot of people are concerned where they look at the businesses. Like, if we really have nuclear energy in free market, well, there are some people who are going to cut corners because you want to cut costs to make profit.
Right.
Okay, well, with nuclear power plants, you don't want to do that.
Oh, of course.
So what are we going to do to prevent that?
Well, and interestingly enough, again, not to go on a different tangent, but one of the things in the fight with Disney that
Yes.
Governor DeSantis had was that he wanted to strip them of their ability, because I guess it gave the way that the original agreement was worded, it actually gave them the option to, well, as they have, produce their own energy. Which they've done a lot. They've now done a lot of solar fields, and they're doing a lot of stuff with renewables, but it didn't exclude them from building their own nuclear power plant, on Disney property. And I think that was one of the things that I guess DeSantis wanted to make sure that the legislature had some say on, rather than Disney just being like, oh, we're going to build our own nuclear power plant.
Well, at the time of them probably signing that pact, the idea of someone creating their own nuclear fusion facility on their private land was not something that could be done physically in the 1930s.
Yeah, but the modern plant is much smaller, from what I understand.
Correct.
Yes.
So
and it is actually far more efficient. So it doesn't even produce as much nuclear waste as the ones we remember from the 70s and whatnot.
So Joe Wicker, who is another one of our trio, one
Regular
of the guys
guest,
yes, here. He says that the U.S. Navy has been an expert in nuclear power for 50 years. Sailors and submariners sleep next door to nuclear reactors. We can handle nuclear power, and we should be using it. So he also says that the best environmentalist is someone that was born on a farm.
Yes, I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of literature out there that says people who work with nature or who live outside the city know nature. Like,
Right.
It's not that they just knowledge or like education know about nature. They are a part of it. They experience.
They understand it.
They participate within how nature operates.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge thing when it comes to environmental policy. Like, you should go to them first because they're seeing a lot of the destruction to the land that we are doing.
Yep.
And farmers, hunters, they're the people that you should go to first.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, because they've seen it, right? They've seen it, in its best and in its worst, and, and so, yeah, I agree with that.
My favorite preaching at church was the analogy of someone skinning a deer and that being good for the environment and biblical. Was by far the best sermon I have heard in quite some time. Now, did people walk out of the church? Yes. But you know what? I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
I will say this about nuclear power plants that I don't think people think of. And it brought me up, and I'm going to talk about it in my own talks of it later on in the year. But in Ukraine, with the war going on, Russia targeted one of their nuclear power plants.
Yes.
And I'm going, okay, if we start building nuclear power plants and that will become our central focus of energy, what does that mean for war?
Sure.
Because that's a huge target that you can blow up and you're like, well, you can't live there. There goes their power. That's a lot of radiation.
Well, the reason why those particular shells hit so close to a nuclear reactor is because they were stupid bombs. So you're literally
Okay.
just aiming
All right.
and just projecting where it's gonna hit. There's no strategery about them hitting those facilities.
Because I think Russia would also understand that obviously it doesn't do them any good to truly nuke, that land that they're trying to take over.
Yeah.
It's like, because again, then it becomes useless to them.
Well, the discussion is if what kind of leader is the Vladimir Putin, and if he's someone that's trying to figure out his legacy, which I think is what he's trying to do when it comes to reclaiming land that was occupied by the Russians back in the day during the USSR. Hitting a nuclear weapon is not going to do it. He will destroy your legacy if you were to fire a nuclear weapon somewhere in the continental Europe. So I think that's something I don't think it's even on the map when it comes to what's going to happen with Ukraine. But I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't the first of many entries into Europe that, better word, penetrations into Europe that Ukraine, that President Putin is going to attempt.
All right, so let's get into our topic. Nebel, David Cabrera, Dr. Leah Genco joining us on today's show, a first-time guest with us.
Perfectly used word. It was a good enough word.
Biden all over the news following the 4th of July holiday, as he should be, given the state of the country and again, given the collapse, the global collapse that's happening as other democracies and republics seem to be under stress, under a test of their own. We have just horrible polling numbers coming out from who's carrying the poll, Nebel?
So we have two polls that are coming out right now for the president, and one of them were conducted by the New York Times. And what was the other company that did the?
Is it the Harvard one?
No,
No,
it was Harvard.
Sierra College.
Sierra College.
Got it.
That did them. So for this one, a whopping 64% of Democratic primary voters don't want the president as their presidential nominee in 2024, including 94% of those aged 18 to 29, according to the brand new poll. It is the latest and brutal survey for Biden, which also shows a 33% of all voters approving of his job. Only 33%. That's insane. 58% of voters say they have an unfavorable view on the president, and 77% of the country believe we're going in the wrong direction.
Let me tell you, I saw footage from President Trump's rally over the weekend in Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It might as well have been 2016 all over again.
The kickoff.
Oh,
It was unreal. It was miles of lines. It was a packed stadium.
When you said lines, I automatically thought cocaine. I'm sorry.
Just because I'm Colombian doesn't mean that's
And
all
it's
that,
not even that.
those are the only
That's not
lines.
even the
that
reason. It's because I read an article about Hunter Biden earlier.
Oh, well, that's another Biden that's been all over the
oh
news.
gosh. He's a
And
hoot.
him and his...
He's a hoot.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Is that the
If that's the way you want to characterize him arguing with a hooker over how much crack he's got.
So I was going to say that's the Texan Protestant version.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's the equivalent of bless your heart.
Yes, yes.
Well, we were talking about old time sayings that I was using, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and some other sayings. So, like, any nice way to say he's a fuck up is basically all you can
It's so
basically
true.
do.
It's so true.
Okay, I'm sorry, bleep.
And so
Do you have a button for
it's
that?
crazy because looking back at looking at that footage from that rally. And again, we've been pretty open about, whether or not we think you should run and that sort of thing. And,
What?
And really, this isn't about that. But it's crazy to me that here we are 6 years later, from the start of his original campaign, and that he still just draws them in. I mean, he still has that gravitational pull. And that if he runs in 24, he could pull it off again.
Really? I don't think he would. Oh, I think he will beat Biden-Harris by a landslide, for sure.
See, this is the question. If Biden is on the ticket as the Democrat, do you think Trump will join? I think so.
Yes.
I think Trump will go for it again because he
Absolutely.
sees how bad. Now we have a history to go against it. But if it's not Trump, if it's not Biden, who could possibly be the Democrat next?
The problem is that if it's not Biden, then you open up the opportunity for voters to be like anybody but Trump.
Yes.
And the problem is that they hate Biden. They obviously realize he's incompetent, and they hate Trump too. But they have to admit things were much better under Trump. And so, again, it's
a pandemic. It was still better under Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of for the person who doesn't like Trump, it's a lose-lose option. Right, but they're not going to reelect Biden. Not with these numbers right now.
No.
And so I think unless the Democrat Party puts somebody else up, let's say a Newsom, for instance.
No.
God, no. I'm not saying I don't think he's I don't think he's going to be the golden child in this situation. But I think anybody else but Biden in that on that Democratic ticket opens up the opportunity for people to vote for anyone else other than Trump.
Yeah, It was a podcast earlier in the year. A New York Times, it was an opinion article in the New York Times, and it said the only best option for the Democrats is Hillary Clinton. The only best option is Hillary Clinton.
Please let it happen. Please let it happen. Let the lizard people come back and arise. Because if she's not a part of the Illuminati, then there's no such thing as Illuminati.
But if you look at the previous primaries for the Democrats, all of them are tainted now.
Oh, yeah.
All of them.
Oh yeah.
So it's like their best bet is Hillary, and it's like that's not a good option either.
Yeah.
So,
right, because now that like Buttigieg is attached to the current administration.
Oh,
yeah.
Kamala attached to the current administration. Really, who do they have on the bench? Bernie's going to run again.
No, Bernie says he's not running again.
Finally,
I don't buy
Bernie
it.
says that he's not going to run again.
He's too old.
This would be the opportunity for him to run.
He's older. He's even older than Biden.
No, I know, but this would be the opportunity for him to run.
And what? Die 12 days into the
Because
and they'll get a worse VP.
Because this is essentially
Kamala Harris.
No, God, no.
Kamala Harris is still the VP, no matter who runs for Democrat.
If there was the emergence of a third party with, again, ridiculous funding and the right candidate, this would be the best opportunity they would have. Mm-hmm. Because there is such a discontentment with both sides of the aisle.
Well, the Alaska rally brought in 6,000 people.
6,000 for Alaska?
For Alaska. That's in Anchorage. I think Anchorage has 6,000 people.
Seriously.
I don't know. No.
I mean, that sounds like small Texas football. It's like the whole town shut down. Everybody's at the rally.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, and they're standing room only. I'm looking at pictures, and it's literally.
It was nuts.
That's the problem.
I think it was Benny Johnson's video that kind of found the video, and and he kind of put all these pieces together, and it was just, again, it was the lines and the lines and the lines and the lines, and all of a sudden the rally is just packed to the gills, and then of course he's dropping all kinds of hints about whether or not he's going to run.
And we've been to rally. Have you attended a Trump rally before?
No, I tried when he came to USF for the Sundome before it became the Yuengling Center.
Yeah,
and I couldn't get in.
So I will say this, John. Did you go to the one at the fairgrounds?
No.
So I went. So I arrived late to find parking and everything else. And there's a huge line, and I'm like, I'm not waiting in a line. So I just literally just walk all the way to the front, like if I knew someone. And of course, I knew everyone at the front. So I sat down, started working a little bit, everything else, and then like 10 minutes later, I walked inside. And then I found myself somewhere in the back of the stage. But I have never had so much fun at a rally in my life, and I've been to a lot of like crusades and like things like that for the church, and I'm like, this was a lot of fun. It was so much fun, and this black and white Hispanics and like even like really prominent leaders in the community. I'm like, this is insane. Like, this was in 16. So I'm like, he's definitely winning. Like, I couldn't see anything else out of it. When he ran the second time around, it's COVID all around. So I think that's caused so many problems. But if we don't have that problem now, I don't see where he doesn't win in this election cycle now. You don't have the excuses of COVID and like Pennsylvania and Arizona messing with their election laws. Like, you don't have that anymore.
Right.
So I don't know. I can't see. Don't get me wrong. I would love our governor to become president, but he first needs to become governor a second time.
Well, he will be.
Yes, I think he will become governor.
His second term will be up in 2024. When
his second term will be up in 26.
Oh, 26.
Yes, that's why he would have to end his term halfway through.
What's also going to be interesting is that you're going to start to see your younger millennials / Gen Zers come into the electorate. And
I don't like that.
And so the social dynamic of this
it doesn't matter. They're not going to vote. Like, these people don't vote. They
typically don't. But what I'm saying is that down the road, what you're going to see is, because the problem right now that we have is that the candidates are too old.
Yes.
Right. And I think the dynamic that we're going to see shift is actually a huge shift. And we saw a little bit of that with like Andrew Yang, and you saw your Beto, and you saw, some of these younger kind of candidates kind of come forward. I think we're going to start skewing towards heavily towards younger candidates, because you got to understand, for those Gen Zs especially and younger millennials, they don't view age as a plus. They don't view age and experience as a selling point.
No.
Don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I also understand. And
I'm not saying it's going to be this
that
cycle.
none of them vote.
It's not going to be this cycle. Maybe not even next cycle, but it is coming.
But we talked about this earlier. The reason why you have such old people running for these positions again is because the dominant circle of people that are voting are over 65 years old. Yeah. So of course you want a leader in that age bracket.
Seeing, if you look at what's happening at the local level, if you look at what's happening, the people who are getting elected in the lower, in the basic, the training grounds, of who's going to be running the country in 10 to 20 years. They're young.
It's young. It is young.
It's young. A lot of young people are getting elected.
Young Republicans.
I know you don't watch TikTok, but you do. So there's a whole.
I don't believe in supporting the Chinese government.
During the pandemic, I went down the rabbit hole of the political side of TikTok, and there were constant TikToks of why I'm a Republican of young women, and they just flash all the young, hot Republican representatives, and I'm like, okay, yeah, fair. Like, what do you know? What about the Democrats? Not really there.
Well, and you do and on the other side, you see a lot of young Republican women running for office and taking leadership roles in the party,
like in Texas.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and the demographics ethnically are changing, as we all know. But again, the Democrats want to deny it. But especially when COVID, I'm telling you, COVID changed a lot of people's political views. And you saw, again, Mexican first generation, second generation Mexican kids basically out there espousing conservative views over the way COVID was handled.
Well, again, and you can probably talk about this more, is that once we can talk about examples of what the left and the right do, but when you get to see what the left does, when they have a little bit of power and everyone's like, okay, let's kind of figure what's going on. And then 6 months later, we're still in the same predicament. And you're like, oh my God, why is Florida? Why is Texas? Why are some of the other states open and flourishing? And I'm in Burbank, California, and I can't even get coffee delivered to my house.
So it's, I always like to compare the right and left with AOC. The left, the AOC's Green New Deal is like the perfect example of left thinking, where here's the big picture, but they never want to discuss what it will take to get there.
Sure.
And so when they enact it, they're like,
because they know people aren't ready for it.
Yeah. And then when they enact it, they're like, oh my gosh, everything's on fire. Why isn't anything working? Because you didn't understand the economy, you idiot. You need to understand what's going on. You need to understand how things work before you make a policy.
Right.
And that's all they do. And like you see that happen in California. And it's like, when will they learn?
And the only reason why there's not more suffering in California is because it is the largest economy in the country, and you have a lot of runway to mess things up and it not affect really the day-to-day lives of people in California, which it is now. It's become such a problem. It's starting to touch people on a day-to-day basis. And again, people don't understand how big California is. It's the 5th largest economy in the world. That's how just California.
Right.
So that is just ridiculous.
But imagine if they weren't. How frightening would California be right now?
Oh my God!
If it weren't for that economy,
New Jersey,
probably, or they probably would not move down here and ruin our economy.
No, because their property values wouldn't be as high.
No, look, hey, thank God for what is it? What's the highway? I keep wanting to say A1A because I'm from Miami.
I-4?
The Pacific Coast Highway. Basically, if it wasn't for the California coastline, thank God for the California coastline.
California,
because that's what's keeping a lot of Californians there.
California is a beautiful state. You can go. I mean, there's parts of it where you can go skiing.
I went to LA
in the afternoon and then go to a beach later on.
But I went to LA and I was like,
yeah, but LA is LA.
It's also commercialized. Yeah. Like it
was just like, I didn't. It was like, okay, I recognize that building and this and that, but it wasn't like, oh wow, this is so beautiful. Like now, get out of LA and start going up the Pacific Coast Highway, and you got
everything north, and like San Francisco and everything is absolutely beautiful. But for me, California was horrible because the strawberries and the oranges just don't taste the same like here.
No,
and you're like,
they don't have the land.
What is going on? This is
the water's different. Yeah.
Okay, now that we've bashed California enough.
Well, and again, what's going to add to Biden's poll numbers continuing to crash is actually our second topic, which is the rifle ban. And so, I don't know if you have the specifics kind of pulled up.
There are no specifics. That's the problem. He just throws things out there.
But it's reactionary. Again, this is reactionary legislation.
I have better reaction legislation with the comment section of our podcast because people are actually noticing what's going on. So say what you're going to say.
So I just want to say, just run by me. Like, as criminologists, we have to be involved in sort of hot topics like this because it's in our field. So like the idea of gun violence, I just want to see what his reasonings are. And I'm pretty sure I'll be able to either not even debunk, like completely debunk, or just be like, okay, that is completely misconstrued. Move on.
The thing is, and this is what I get me annoyed with the president. He makes these outlandish statements, and he's like, America is awash in weapons of war. I'm like, what does that even mean?
What?
Like, I don't understand.
You mean the weapons the cartel brought to us?
Yeah.
No. The weapons that you sold to the cartel
that
got brought back to the country.
And the ones we left in Afghanistan, yeah.
Yeah. God, that was so stupid. That's also gonna affect his poll numbers. People are gonna remember that during election.
You don't think I'm gonna get some kind of mailer that has like an Afghan child left on a tarmac?
Well, not to rewind about 20 minutes, but I mean, but this is the other reason that Trump's gonna win. Trump runs very well on negativity.
Yes.
Trump feeds on it. Right, he knows how to leverage negativity. And I told Anibal when we dissected over and over again the 2020 election, and why he lost. I told Anibal, the reason he lost was because he ran on negativity. He didn't run on any of his accomplishments,
which were so many.
I know. If you go back and you watch the campaign ads, the rallies, all that stuff, all he did was focus on the negative of the other side.
Yes.
All he did was attack. He never ran on his accomplishments. Had he run on everything he had accomplished, despite COVID, I think he could have won a re-election.
Did you know he? I got to watch his RNC again for the presidential run, but I believe someone mentioned that he enacted a federal suicide line.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
He did a lot of really great stuff that nobody ever heard about because, again, he couldn't put his phone down. He couldn't stop sending out tweets. And so the problem was, again, so the media equally thrives on negativity over positivity. It's like, should we write about the suicide helpline or should we write about the awful thing he just said about AOC?
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing.
And so now with him
what's the more salacious, right?
So with him now coming on board to run for 24, Trump has a much better, again, do I think he's going to go back to negativity? Yes, because that's what he loves doing. Because he gets to bash the other person. He will make some kind of sign about Biden, and then we'll all laugh about it. So it makes it an easier target because now we have 4 years to run where Biden has failed. But some of the other things that he talked about was, I am determined to ban these weapons again, the high-capacity magazines that hold 30 rounds or more, and let mass shooters fire hundreds of bullets into a matter of minutes. I'm not going to stop until we do this. So I asked a question into the group chat about what is your definition of an assault weapon?
Oh, jeez.
Which is basically me throwing a grenade in the comment section, just walking away.
Oh, man. I hate that term with a passion.
Because it's not a real thing.
It's not.
Right. Exactly. Anything can be an assault weapon.
Have you seen, I remember the first argument about weapons, and I saw a TikTok video of someone saying, that's a rifle, and then looking at his wife and threw the gun at her. Now it's an assault rifle.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. It's going to get good. It's going to get good because, again, you're focusing on the wrong problem because you should be focusing on the individual and the healthcare situation, mental health illness, and the fact that the state that the last one happened, Illinois, has so many red flag laws and they all didn't work.
But that's the thing. So you got to, again, go back to, you were saying trends. And so with the trend we're seeing are young men with virtually, let's say virtually no record, because they did have, I think both of these guys had some run-ins where like the police was at least kind of sort of looking into them.
Yes.
Or had some sort of encounter with them in the past.
And then mommy and daddy buy them a weapon anyway.
But they have or they turn 18 and they just buy it themselves and they have no record that's going to, again, flag anybody. And that's the thing. It's it's almost like coming up with a magic trick. It's like how do you figure out the formula to prevent these guys who have the mental health problems that we're seeing, because those all you can also see the similarities in whether it's their social class, whether it's their family status, whether it's you see a lot of patterns, and so what is the remedy to prevent guys like that who, again, have a clean record?
So Mr. Fred is saying that it's not just a mental health issue, but it's also a cultural issue that we're running into.
Yes. So I can actually...
well, and he'd be the right person to make that.
Speak on that. So we know in America, and this goes back till 1921, is when we first have the idea of the concentric zone theory. And we built our cities around a business zone, and then you have the transition zone around it, which is relatively the lower class where they live because it's cheaper land. But because there's less investment there, there's a lot of chaos. But the problem is with that is because there's chaos, there's also going to be crime, and there's going to be violence because you're going to have former gangs, you got to protect yourself, so on and so forth. People are in hypervigilance. But over the years, especially with social media and all that, that has transcended those borders. Yep. And people think that, oh, well, we don't the guns create this violence or incentivize them. No, it's not. It's the poor management and investment that we've constantly had in our nation. We never really understood how to handle disorganization. And we still don't. Like, our response is red flag laws, which is micromanaging people. Mm-hmm. How do you micromanage someone in their private home? You cannot. That's a limitation for our government. Yeah. It is completely stupid. All it does is it gives more power, especially for the federal government, to just say, here's how you should live. And that is not what America was based on.
Yeah, look, let's be honest. I mean, they're never going to, and I say this, at least I don't think within our lifetime, they're ever going to take our weapons.
No.
I mean, I think you'll see another civil war before that happens.
Correct.
But yeah, the problem. I think people have finally woken up and are seeing past the Democrat talking points about the guns being the problem. I don't think anybody buys that anymore.
No.
I don't see that excuse. You can tell doesn't work anymore.
What was it? We have I think it was 300 million. No, like 4 or 5. No, I think 200 or 300 million guns in the United States, and we're only dealing with these kind of shootings every once in a while.
Because again, in other countries where gun ownership is just as prevalent, I mean, they don't have these kind of problems.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So yes, it is an American cultural problem. In fact, that is an American cultural problem, whereas racism is not uniquely an American cultural problem.
Yes.
But of course they want to make it look like it is.
Okay, so we're having a lot of communications on the thread. Wicker says the military uses pistols, shotguns, and common rifles. Are they military grade weapons of war also? Who is it? Kimberly. Wait. Let me finish. Kimberly Davis says, "What is an assault weapon? SUV is her version of an assault weapon."
That's Kimberly's assault weapon.
Not only. So we already talked about the mental health. FYI, the Army. Why are people calling me in the middle of the podcast? They should know better. The culture can be more powerful than the social controls like laws and the judicial system, is what you talked about already. Mm-hmm. And then Fred talks about how he's a doctor, which I said prove it, and he says call USF. So I'll have to do that on my own time.
What? Wait, what?
So Fred, a gentleman on the thread, says that he's a doctor, and I was like, prove it. He's a doctor in anthropology.
Yeah.
Oh, anthropology.
Anthropology.
Okay.
They're just joking around.
It's like people that study rocks.
Oh.
Did anyone point out that the 10-year assault weapon ban enacted in 1994 had no measurable effects on the reduction of gun violence? Been there, done that. Guess attempting to spawn don't last long.
See, Fred's a doctor of anthropology, where I find myself to be more of a doctor of restoration hardware. That's a little bit more like my ballpark.
I'm a doctor of bouginess.
Bougie.
Just across the board. Just bouginess across the board.
Look, see the alarm already sent off, so it's telling me to stop. Give me a good restaurant, I can give you a good quote. The things like that. Just the things that matter.
Well, one thing about when people are we shouldn't have guns in this nation, I'm going, look at Venezuela. Look what happened when they tried to revolt. And guess what? The government used the military to fight against people.
Australia.
No, I'm not saying our military
even
will
more
turn
recent,
against
as a
us.
more recent example.
Yeah.
Australia.
I mean, look at the ridiculousness
Yeah.
that they came up with during COVID. You know, the absurdity. They never would have gotten away with that if they'd had an armed
People
citizenry.
were getting ripped out of churches. Things just got ridiculous in Australia and New Zealand. And again, these are just two island nations. Like they can control like population movements in those countries. But you realized very quickly how free. So what? That one movie, the TV show, The Newsroom, where like the first episode they talk about who's really free, and the guy talks about how like New Zealand's free, France is free, everything's so free. No, it's not. It's not equality. It is not the same freedom that we.
All you have to do is wait till something goes down, and you realize real quick how much freedom you have.
Canada, the government was pressuring banks to kick people off the system because they were protesting in the for the truckers in the capital, and you're like, really, a government has the right to kick people off of the financial system? And in Canada you do. And you're like, this is crazy.
Well, and again, going back to saying the quiet part out loud, and Trudeau basically coming out and literally saying that you do not have the right to defend yourself.
Correct. It's insane.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching The Yard Sign, the most important relevant podcast in politics. Anibal David Cabrera, Dr. Leo Genco, assistant professor at the University of Tampa, our guest today. We appreciate
Actual
you
doctor.
for watching. We've got Anibal, who's a doctor of Home Depot. I'm a doctor of... I don't know.
I've been to Home Depot once.
I was trying to build a joke
And the only
there.
reason why.
I was trying to build the plane as it was flying, with the joke there, but
Just
it didn't
stick to
land.
cocaine.
Yeah. Jeez, thanks. Man, that's twice in one show.
You're the one that brought it up the first time.
All right. We appreciate you listening, watching the show wherever you may be doing so. Don't forget the audio portion of our show. Huge following there. We love all of our audio listeners. Be sure to share, leave us a review, and tell people about the podcast as we get closer to the midterms. We've got a very exciting guest that I'm going to be confirming here very shortly. We've got a soft confirmation for next Monday, looking for a hard confirmation. And once we get that, then we'll be promoting it. But it's somebody we talk about often on the show, and is part of a very important race in this midterm election. And so hopefully she'll be joining us next week. So stay tuned for that. We have Dr. Genco on the show, and I know one of the things that you personally wanted to kind of bring to light because, again, oftentimes, it's the most important stories, just get forgotten about because the news cycle and our attention span. I mean, you can blame it on any number of things. And one of the things, it was a year or 2 years ago, the Piney Point.
1 year ago.
Okay. So, which again, I mean, in COVID years, it seems like it was more like 5 years ago.
It's true.
And so Piney Point, if you could kind of give us a quick kind of recap of what happened, and then we can get into kind of where things are today.
So the issue with Piney Point was one of their reservoirs broke. And what happened, about 215 million gallons of polluted water was dumped into
And
the
this
bay.
is a company that does what?
I believe they do chemicals for fertilizer.
So phosphorus and
Yes.
so similar to like Mosaic and,
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so over the years, now, not a lot of people have focused on it, which surprises me because it's Tampa Bay. We want to preserve our bay, especially with manatees and all that. But there really hasn't been much action from the city. Now, the state's trying to deal with it. And right now they're currently looking at refilming the reservoirs so it doesn't break next time. But I haven't really seen any initiatives that would actually clean up the pollution that was in the water. I could be wrong, but no, there hasn't been any news on it, which shocks me. And that's what really bothers me because there's upset events all the time with companies around pollution. And this is going to be seen as an upset if nothing is done because, yes, they're looking to criminally charge it, but these criminal charges are nothing for corporations.
Right. And they typically have budgets to deal with this sort of thing.
Yes.
And so, what I tell you will happen is that they're going to wait until there's either another type of environmental event and then be like, oh, we wonder if this is related. So for example, red tide.
Yes.
Everybody wants to point the finger at red tide for any little environmental thing that happens, especially when red tide comes around, they'll be like, well, is it this? Is it that? Everybody wants to try to, play detective into figuring out what's causing red tide, despite the fact that, I believe, and please correct me, I mean, it is a naturally occurring event. Now, some believe that it's because of what we've done to the Okeechobee and our waterways down the state. Some believe it's because of pollution, maybe similar to Piney Point, that it causes this. But I mean, you've got multiple aquariums, Marine Aquarium, close to Piney Point, being one of them. I mean, wouldn't it be known already if there were that simple of a cause and effect?
No. So the environment is such a complex system that it's sort of like charging a corporation to go to jail. Who goes to jail? It's way too complex. So there's an idea in philosophy, especially what I study, that human ecology is not separate from nature, that all our actions play into the physical laws of nature.
Okay.
And so what we do affects the environment. What the environment does will affect us because we are a part of it. And because of that, it is so hard to determine where it starts. Now, we can do time series to figure it out. So a lot of people looked at when the sugarcane industry took over Okeechobee and the Everglades and how the filtration system changed over the years and saw like, well, after that, there was a rise in red tide. So, but again, relation-wise, it's more of a correlation, association that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Nobody's truly been able to figure out the smoking gun for red tide.
Exactly.
And people in the thread are talking about it, actually saying that some types of red tide are a naturally occurring event. And that's the problem, I think, with the larger conversation.
Because it has been happening for decades, if not longer, centuries.
Yes.
Is what I understand.
I think it's the frequency of it that is increasing. And they weren't.
Got it.
What's triggering in the environment that's causing more red tide? Because I remember living in Corpus Christi, Texas, and red tide was 4 times out of the year. Yeah. And it was like, okay, red tide, don't go to the beach. There's jellyfish all over. Don't step on the jellyfish. But then after like a few days or so, it's good. But I believe it's a lot more than that now. Like 10, 12. Like that's 3 times more.
Well, and in Florida here, I mean, again, all of our waterways are connected, you know, whether it's above or below ground, you know. And so, again, it makes it harder to kind of pinpoint, you know, the source of the problem. But with Piney Point, like you said, it's not so much, you know, pointing the finger and saying, hey, you messed up here, you got to fix it. But it seems to be the problem seems to be accountability and holding them accountable and making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yes. So a lot of it deals with how do companies handle, what do they say? It's not pollution. That's not the correct term. It's
waste.
Byproducts. From production, because everything that we will do. Will
so like gypsum.
Gypsum.
In the production of gypsum.
Yes.
You know, you have the byproduct, which is like, again, here in southern Hillsborough County, we have these mountains that are not naturally occurring, you know, but there you have these mountains that are created from the byproduct of gypsum.
Yes, and it's like whenever you filter water, like where does all the waste go from that? So there will always be byproduct. It's going to be forever a law in how we do things. So the problem is, how do we protect the environment from toxic and harmful waste without stifling business? And there's many ways that people have talked about. The most popular one from academia side I can contest is controlling business through the government, which I don't think that's appropriate. I think it should come from more of a market, like a consumer base. Because I hate the idea that people. So I see
more incentivization, I would say. You know, like, so again, we talked about Mosaic, or I mentioned Mosaic. So Mosaic, again, you know, here I would say in Hillsborough County has a pretty positive reputation. But again, a lot of what they're doing is excavation. You know, they do have a pretty severe environmental impact. You go out to Hardy County. I mean, they practically own most of the county. They're excavating most of the county. They employ most of the county. And so while around Hillsborough, you see, oh, they own this piece of land and they own this piece of land, and it's preservation and conservation and you know, calling all these, you know, warm and fuzzies, you know, meanwhile, the dirty work's being done further inland where next to nobody lives.
Yes.
But to that point, I think if you create incentives, for them to kind of do that restoration work. I think maybe, would you say that may be a better approach, or?
Yes, but the problem is like who should dictate those incentives?
Right.
The government.
No. See, I see the market as a machine, and as anyone who's a mechanic, you can't fix a machine from the outside. You have to be inside it, and the government only operates on the outside of the machine. So it's better for consumers to say, hey, I'm not buying your product, or I'm investing my money in this company over this because they're actually doing restoration work. If we can change the culture of how we consume products and what businesses we want to focus on, I believe companies who want to stay competitive will adjust to that.
Right.
But as we mentioned about the gun violence, because someone mentioned it, it's culture.
Yeah.
It is what we want as a people and as individuals of how that would affect how we do business.
Because the problem is that we're seeing the emergence of the ESG scores.
Yes.
And that's a pretty frightening proposition, because you've got this kind of unelected, this kind of this unappointed, unelected body of people setting the standards, global standards, for what is acceptable from a company in terms of how they govern themselves socially, environmentally, and I forget what the other one was. And so it again, like leaving it, like you said, like, who do you leave this up to? How do you decide, or do you leave it down to the community? And then leave the individual communities to decide.
I'm a big component on localism. The more complexities, the more power you give to more complex forms of government, the more alienated you are from affecting the things around you.
Right, but this was in Manatee County, right?
Yes.
And so very rural, very industrial. And you probably have a workforce that isn't very engaged in the political process, because there's also a lot of immigrant labor, and so again, like who's left out to make those decisions? I mean, they have, the city of Bradenton, they have the county commission, but again, it's are they maybe already too entrenched with these companies to be making the best decisions for the environment and the community?
That's one of the big things for green criminologists that we have to handle is the deals.
And I think that might be a larger conversation, that it cannot be just one aspect of society that's looking at this and figuring out a way to build something. It might need to be a partnership of all aspects of society to be able to figure something out, when it comes to the commercial aspects of it, to the intellectual aspects of it, to even government and education. Like, there's a lot of things, and then having representatives from the community itself that are not politicians get involved in building some kind of case study for it to be able to work forward. People on the comment section says potentially into a super fund, considering that the Bay is a natural resource, is some people talking about it, that they will pay into a fund of large sums. People going back and forth on that aspects of it. The paper mills use their own byproducts to fuel their plants. It makes financial sense. Many industries are like that. Create a market change, not political cultural pressure. Companies have the ability to incentivize external costs and effectively the means of addressing their impact on the environment. So there's a lot. I think it's almost like all the above kind of response. It cannot just be the government. It needs to be the government and the people and companies to bring it all together.
Well, that would also indicate the government giving power back to the people as well, which the federal government does not want to do right now.
Well, the Supreme Court just did
it. No government that I know wants to do that.
No, that's the purpose of the government, is to take away the rights of the people.
Yeah. All right. Well,
and with that.
Well, no, look, I appreciate the update, and again, as kind of the phrase, that I've kind of come up with is like, the environment is our economy. As a born and raised Floridian, I don't think enough people realize that our environment is our economy. And there are, we're seeing the emergence of more and more conservative leaning environmental organizations, and which is exciting because they are trying to find that balance between capitalism and positive business, entrepreneurship and business governance and in protecting the environment. And I think that's how, through that consensus, I think, or through that compromises is how we find actual solutions.
Yeah.
Because again, you're not going to stop, especially in this country, you're not going to stop corporations and companies doing what they do. Again, unless you come down with a heavy hand from the government, or nor do you want to. And then on the other side, I mean, again, people have to live here and work here, and we have to we kind of have to find middle ground for everything.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff you can go down that rabbit hole.
It's a true state. That's a very true statement.
Yeah.
This can go down a lot, and I think this is a good transition of when it comes to government, individuals, and corporations taking accountability. As is our next topic. Johnny?
Yeah, which is Elon Musk unfollowing Twitter, quite literally. My good friend Elon Musk, who I'm a big fan of, is now backing out of the Twitter deal, unfortunately, because I've been on Twitter since about 2007, and has seen its demise. Or just kind of its plateau, really, because there's still a foundation there of users, but I mean, it's pretty much become not even an echo chamber. It's just kind of it's kind of just like. It would be like blasting music like into the Grand Canyon. Like it's out there, and it's creating noise, but nobody's listening.
That's horrible.
But that's what Twitter has become. It really has. I mean, it doesn't really drive traffic. Nobody's having conversations like these. I remember like actually talking to people on Twitter and really building a relationship that way first, and then you'd meet them like at a conference or a convention, or even if you just happen to randomly be in their town or city.
You met people from Twitter?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In early Twitter all the time.
What year was this?
Like I said, I've been on Twitter since 07. So, you're talking about 08,
Twitter
09,
was
10.
around in 07?
I was about to say, I was in college though.
April. Yeah, I joined Twitter in April of 2007.
It must have been a baby website back then.
Oh,
There
yeah.
were 12
You could-
people.
No, like people talk about like how engaged like celebrities are now. They were far more engaged back then because there was hardly anybody on the platform.
Yeah.
So I remember having political discussions with Russell Simmons, Questlove, Rob Thomas from Matchbox 20.
Nice.
Like we would get into these political discussions. I wish I'd screenshot. I actually had a whole healthcare debate on Obamacare with Russell Simmons on DM.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, which is amazing, and he's obviously here advocating for it and blah blah blah, and and it was just the fact that someone of that status,
Responded.
was that engaging and that responsive, and that these celebrities that we have elevated culturally onto a pedestal were so available, was just, it was crazy. I mean, again, even early politicians were much more engaged. Now they have a team of people that's running their Twitter accounts. They're hardly ever the ones.
Wasn't Twitter's supposed to be in the response to Facebook, where Facebook got too much and people just wanted to comment? Like it was just to comment, nothing else.
Right. Well, and it was more about, I think it was supposed to be more of like a micro journal. Early Twitter was more of a micro journal. Like, here's what I'm doing today. Here's this, place I found, or here's something I've been thinking about. It was very much a micro journal because, again, early on, you couldn't post pictures or anything. In fact, funny enough, I started a website that was going to be a directory of hashtags.
Oh.
Of course, I realized pretty quickly I could never keep up with the amount of hashtags that were being created. I mean, even when people started figuring out, but the hashtags were created basically to filter through the conversations. And so you would search for the hashtags much like you do now. Of course, now they're typically hyperlinked. But back then, that was the way that you actually also kept track of a conversation. And Twitter back then was chronological. So to me, it was more like the ticker on the stock market. Yeah. Like it was like the pulse. It was like the true pulse of the country, because it was like, what is everybody talking about right now? And really, honestly, where I think the beginning of the, not the demise, because it's still around, but the beginning of kind of what made Twitter so great, kind of come to an end was really when they went into an algorithm for your newsfeed.
Yes.
When they implemented it and it was no longer chronological, that's when they really started messing with the formula that made them popular.
I think all social medias had the algorithm around the same time where they tried to create something like that. Because Facebook did something like
Facebook was started it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because it started following like, oh, you like this, so I'm gonna give you some more of that. I'm like, nah, just give me a raw news feed.
Yeah.
Something that's just.
And oftentimes the only way to find people were because you would see other people talking to those people. And so you just start following people because they're like, oh, okay, I see you're talking about, oh, I agree with what you said there. Let me follow you. You know, or celebrities again always had the upper hand. You know, you'd come across somebody would share something of theirs. You know, retweets weren't a thing. You actually had to copy, and then you had to paste the original tweet, and and the whole retweet came from the fact that people would put RT before the pasted tweet, and then
So you
send
have
it
less
out
characters
as
to deal with.
Yeah. And this was back when it was what 70 characters, 72 characters.
So for
Twitter was
those
raw.
those that we lost onto the conversation because this became very boring very quickly.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated.
Anyways.
Your eyes lit up like Sunday morning, and I was like, I can barely keep up. I'm
Funny
I'm
is
answering
like
emails right now from work.
What's funny is
I'm
I can
lost,
see
and he's gonna
myself.
keep on going.
I can see myself in a few years, like explaining to my daughter, like the history of social media. You know, like it's some folklore.
It
you know,
is a
because-
folklore.
It is. Remember the original Farmville?
So, oh my gosh, yes, I was on that game. So it's gonna be like this: the internet wasn't even as wild as it is now compared to this generation of like them putting their ass and titty online. Like
You haven't been in chat rooms then.
I evidently not. So like there's a meme that talks about how like you see dad or grandpa in like the 50s and 40s in his uniform, like black and white picture,
Yeah.
whatever, and then you have his great grandson like showing his ass on Instagram, and it's like, and this look here's a picture of grandpa.
Yeah.
Well, not the right side of grandpa, but the back side of grandpa.
No, it is really weird, the dynamic, because, for instance, I met with someone recently who is in college, who's working on a or just out of college, working on a campaign.
I'm sorry for him.
And and then, you know, and so you have this immediate perception of who they are.
Yes.
Right? You know, or assumptions really of who they are. And carry themselves very well, very professional, this and that. And then I go and because you put their phone number in your phone, now all of a sudden they start coming up as recommended follows on all your social media platforms, you know, because you connect your contacts.
I do not do that. I'm so afraid of putting my phone number in these social media accounts.
So I love now that apps are requiring to answer the question. Like, do you want to have it connected to your apps at all times, or do you just for this one time? Or think?
Yeah.
And I'm like, just for this one time, every single time, because I don't like the idea of it. Real quick. So, Coded Bias is an interesting documentary that the algorithm on social media by Fred. He says it's on Netflix, and we should watch it.
Well, again, well, we'll get to that in a second. But what I was going to say is that then you go into their social media accounts and you see like the insanity that some of these people are posting because they don't know any better. These are kids that, you know, they haven't understood the professional repercussions of what they're posting on their social media.
That is true.
And especially for someone who wants to play in politics.
It's gonna come up. It's gonna come up. If you're in a lace bra, it's gonna come up.
And I was like, oh, like it just really, really shocked me. But again, they don't know any better because this has been around their entire life, and their parents are using it.
Yes,
and so they think it's okay because their parents use it.
I actually limited my my activity when my parents went on it.
Really?
Yes, because for me it was my escape. It was like this is only supposed to be for my friends and like people I'm going to be friendly with. And
why is my aunt asking for me to friend request her?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, and of course my mother is
like,
one of those people who have like a cartoon image instead of her actual face.
Sure.
And
So
I'm like,
you said yes before you even read the name? Oh my gosh, you did, didn't you?
No. It's just weird because it's like. The people online who are political ranters don't have a picture of their
face. Yes.
Or they change their name. Or,
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, mom, she's so young.
It really is that kind of dynamicness.
Yeah.
They're so young to the game. They have no idea.
I'm getting memes from 10 years ago from
See,
her.
for me, I've always known I was going to be an ambassador like 30 years from now. And so I made sure I didn't have any ridiculousness on my social media. And so I've always known that. And you still see that even today. People that have really thought about becoming president or something like that, or get into politics, like they've known they want to be in politics since they were a child, they don't have the kind of exposure.
Yeah, but see, the other side of this is also a problem, because I know a guy, for instance, who is a financial planner. Okay. And he is a client of a client. And I was trying to find a picture of him for a project I was working on. And I'm like searching for this guy. And so typically, if they don't provide me with a picture, I just go and I search for them online. Eventually, I hit a social media account that has a decent picture of him, right? But then I go, his LinkedIn account hasn't been updated in like 2 years. His Facebook is been hacked or something because it's all spam. His Twitter account is also about 4 or 5 years old with nothing, and like with no updates. And so like now it's like, well, what's going on here? Right? Because like this guy is basically no current online presence.
That's weird.
Right. And that's what and that's what I'm getting at, is now the perception is, well, what's the deal with this guy? And why does he not have a current online presence?
I could see you having like maybe. Okay, so for me, I have one platform that I focus on, which is Facebook. And the reason why I have one is because my wife says I cannot handle multiples. And so that's the reason why I'm only
You should be on
Facebook.
LinkedIn.
And I used to have a LinkedIn account. I think it's still active. I haven't really tried it. But honestly, I can't understand how people have like multiples. Like they have like 5 or 6 applications on their phones and they're constantly going through all these other things. I'm like, how do you function at night trying to go to sleep with all these things ringing?
I've reached the burnout level to now I post very little anywhere.
I think y'all are missing one component because I'm on all of them. I'm single, so
That's what I was gonna say. If you're single, you're probably on everything.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've
But to you know what Dr. Fred was saying, those documentaries that have kind of pulled the curtain, that have pulled back the curtain on these social media platforms. Look, all it is heavy-handed psychology. I mean, this is cultural stuff that's been known for decades, if not centuries, as to how our brains work, how we work culturally. You know, I mean, you look at New York. You know, New York is a perfect example of the social dynamics that we now see online. People are going to gravitate towards that to which they are most comfortable. So, you know, if you were from China, you were probably going to try to live somewhere near Chinatown. You know, if you were from Jamaica, Queens, you were probably going to be, from, Latin America. You know, you were probably, if you were Harlem, African American, right? Like those are just, that's what we gravitate to. You see it in Miami. Mm-hmm. The Cubans are in South Miami. You know, you see the Venezuelans are in West Miami. You see the Colombians are in North Miami and South Broward. I mean, it's just, I think it's what we do naturally. Again, going back through anthropology, it's in our nature. Mm-hmm. I think it's in our DNA to find those people to whom we connect with the most. And as we have new interests, like politics, mm-hmm. It's like you, for instance, you said, that you were telling us kind of when you shifted from left to right, so that starts to slowly kind of shift and rearrange kind of your social circles.
Yes, big time.
And so again, like we're no different now than we were 200 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's just a different platform that we're doing it on.
Well, it's interesting because so there's a scholar, Robert Sampson. He's really big in the social disorganization theory. And I mentioned the centric zone and the transition zone where you had the issue of culture, the violent culture there, and how social media has exacerbated it. Well, it's because Sampson has found that people are now organizing their society around social media interests. And so now it's no longer little Chinatown. It's where the hipsters are. Yeah. It's where all the rural areas are, the country area. And so it's amazing how social media has reshaped how we organize our society. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, yeah, because again, it's the reason why Facebook pushes groups, for instance, mm-hmm. Because they know that that's going to create more engagement. If we find more people which we have more in common with, we're more likely to stay engaged on that platform.
Yes.
And so you see them pushing, again, because now that the kind of the cat's out of the bag as to kind of all the psychological tricks they were pulling on people, which may or may not have exacerbated the polarization of our politics. And I would say that
Actually, I think it was one person, but I will remain since I know his name's a hot topic. I will not say his name.
Okay, so real quick. So Kimberly Davis says that she does more strategic posting, and then she jokes about strategically, which is what I love. Fred, social media has had an impact on language. We think in language influences the way we see reality. Social media is playing a big role in our cultural environment. And he also talks about how there is generational preferences when it comes to social media platforms. And there is already a shift from TikTok favored by young Zers as older people, parents are utilizing that platform as well.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, once your parents get on a platform, it changes the way you use it. And not for the positive or negative. It just is because, again, there are certain things you do and don't want them to see.
Correct.
And so the dynamics of this are incredibly interesting to me, especially given that, and this is what I was tying it back to earlier in tonight's conversation, which is that because all of this technology comes so easy to basically anyone born after, I don't know, let's say 1980. Ugh. You know what I mean? Or maybe even a little earlier than that.
I would say after 2000, in all honesty.
So,
yes,
but it's created this shift.
Given a child a iPad, and you see how quickly they figure out how to rearrange the settings, and it's very scary. Yeah. And it's almost to the point to where I've read these before, where the engineers are actually using it to where that's the goal is to it be so adaptability of individuals from any economic and social background. Yeah. So that's the point. But I don't fear it as others do. I think it's actually just another evolution.
I think parenting needs to play in a role. That's
well, yeah, but the sociological impact that this is having is what you just said there. That kid knows how to use that device better than the parent does. And so the dynamic is shifting because we used to learn everything from our parents.
Yeah.
And that's no longer the case. Like now, if a kid wants to learn how to build a robot, then he doesn't need to go ask his dad how to do it. He can just go on YouTube.
Yeah.
He can just go on YouTube and learn how to do it. And so there is this structural change that's happening where we don't look to our elders anymore for the information that we're seeking or the advice or just the path, of that we want to go in.
Yeah, but that's
because now we have this.
But that's been happening since we were able to finally put the printing press, where you no longer needed to go to an elder to get the knowledge that you wanted. You were able to just open a book, and this is just another.
This is totally different.
I don't think it's as different as we really say it is. I mean, people were saying that the invention of the mass circulation of newspapers were going to be the detriment of society because people were just reading the newspaper.
I'm not saying it's going to be the downfall. I'm just saying that it's changing the child-parent relationship.
And I don't disagree with that, but I think society in general has always been moving to a different and more...
Because now you see parents asking their kids to, hey, can you help me with my computer? Can you help me with my iPad? Can you help me with my watch, with my phone?
That is more...
And there seems to be more of a reliance on the parent on the child.
Yes.
When it comes to certain things.
I think it's more or less that parents... So it goes down back to learning, and there's a age at which the way you learn slows down, I think. But it's also stubbornness in terms of adults of not sitting down and just learning.
Yeah.
So I love my mother. She's great. She doesn't know how to operate a DVD player still.
It's kind of like that commercial where the ladies were posting the pictures on the wall.
Yeah. And I'm like,
that's not how any of this works.
I'm like, Mom, just put in a DVD and just mess around with it. Just learn it. And she goes, why would I do that? And I'm going, do you want to watch the movie or not? Like, yes, then mess around and find out.
And so going back to the parenting conversation, Kim Davis says, I have a contract with my kids that the phone that they have is mine and subject to oversight at all times. That's a good one. My brother-in-law is actually about to institute, if his daughter doesn't get things in order, return to the flip phone.
Nice.
Oh, have you seen the foldable flip phones that are all touch?
I have, and I think that's crazy. But could you imagine being given a razor now, the flip phone now? That's impossible. Like, how do you function?
Remember the rumors
I remember the sidekicks.
Oh,
I
the
had a sidekick,
sidekicks.
and that was my ish.
See, so I had the Nokia Sidekick knockoff.
Oh.
Which was actually, it was like a half moon shaped phone.
Oh, and would slide.
No, it wouldn't slide or anything, but it had a little screen in the middle, had a QWERTY keyboard, and that's why I got it, because it was one of the first phones with a QWERTY keyboard. And I refused to text anybody until a QWERTY keyboard came out on a phone. And it also, the other thing I loved is that it had an FM radio built into it.
Do you remember when we used to get charged per text?
Yes. Yes.
And they still do that in some countries.
$87 later was the bill that my parents got the first time I realized it. And then I realized like my budget that I could do.
That's why I also did. I didn't text. I don't think I started texting until.
I always texted.
Rollover minutes.
Yes. I remember you couldn't call outside the state.
Nope.
Like,
Yeah, right.
it got real back in the day.
Until, what was it, 7 o'clock?
Yes.
Yep.
It was
Yep.
insane.
All right.
What?
Normally it was 9. 7 o'clock was a good plan.
Oh, yeah.
You had to wait until 9 if you had one of the cheap plans.
Got that good credit.
All right. On behalf of Evil David Cabrera and Dr. Genco.
Doctor.
That did.
Doctor.
Doctor.
Wallowitz. He got his doctorate eventually.
The Big Bang Theory? Yeah.
That's
that's
the
right.
joke. I'm sorry, Mr.
Wallowitz.
Fred, that he couldn't get the joke.
But Leo, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
It was great to have you on. Loved your insight. We'll definitely be having you back. Again, Anibal David Cabrera, as always. We, again, are excited about a potential guest for next week that is running for office, who we've been working on getting on the show for some time. So keep an eye on our social media platforms for updates on that. But don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, ring the bell if you're watching on YouTube. And check out the audio version of our podcast on your favorite social media platform over at the Tech Overlords at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and Samsung podcast platforms. On behalf of Anibal, Dr. Leo, yours truly, Johnny Torres, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you back here next Monday night, 7 o'clock. Good night, everybody.